Welcome to another video on human embryology. Today we'll learn how the primitive heart tube forms, loops, and develops into different parts of the heart. Let's begin. Formation of the heart tube and its subdivisions. The mesenchymal cells in the cardiogenic area, located ventral to the developing pericardial cavity, condense to form two angioblastic cords called cardiogenic cords. These cords get canalized to form two endothelial heart tubes. These tubes fuse with each other in a craniocaudal direction to form a single primitive heart tube. However, the caudal ends of the two heart tubes fail to fuse with each other. As a result, the caudal end of the heart tube remains bifurcated. The heart tube forms 5 dilations, from cranial to caudal end. These are as follows. Truncus arteriosus, bulbus caudis, primitive ventricle, primitive atrium, sinus venosus. The truncus arteriosus is the arterial end of the primitive heart tube, while sinus venosus is the venous end of this tube. Since the fusion of the heart tube is partial in the region of sinus venosus, it consists of a central part that communicates with the primitive atrium and the right and left horns of sinus venosus that represent unfused caudal parts of the two heart tubes. Arterial and venous ends of the heart tube. Arterial end, the truncus arteriosus, represents the arterial end of the heart. Wide supra. Cranially, it is continuous, with aortic sac having right and left horns. From each horn of the aortic sac, the first pharyngeal arch artery arises and passes backwards on the lateral side of the foregut to become continuous with the respective dorsal aorta. Venous end, the sinus venosus, represents the venous end of the heart, wide supra. Each horn of sinus venosus receives 3 primitive veins: vitelline vein from the yolk sac, umbilical vein from the placenta, and common cardinal vein from the body wall, fate of various dilations of the heart tube. The central part and right horn of sinus venosus are absorbed into the primitive atrium to form the smooth part of the right atrium. The left horn of the sinus venosus forms part of the coronary sinus that opens into a smooth part of the right atrium. Primitive atrium is partitioned to form the rough part of the right and left atria. Formation of cardiac wall. The cardiac wall is made up of 3 layers, from inside to outside. These are endocardium, myocardium, epicardium. These layers develop as the splanchno-pleuric mesoderm on the dorsal aspect of the pericardial cavity proliferates and becomes thick to form myoepicardial mantle, which invests the front and sides of the endothelial heart tube. At this stage, the heart tube is separated from the myocardial mantle, primordial myocardium, by a cellular gelatinous connective tissue called cardiac jelly, which is an acellular matrix secreted by developing myocardium. Subsequently, it is replaced by the myocardium. The endothelial heart tube forms the endocardium of the heart, the myoepicardial mantle, acquisition of external adult form of the heart. The sacculated primitive heart tube acquires adult form of the heart as follows. As the development progresses, the sacculated heart tube, particularly bulbous Cordis, and primitive ventricle, grows rapidly in a limited space, dorsal to the pericardial cavity. Since the arterial and venous ends of the heart tube are fixed, it gradually invaginates into the pericardial cavity in a U-shaped manner, thus forming a cardiac loop. The cardiac loop mainly involves bulbous Cordis, forming cephalic limb of the loop, and primitive ventricle, forming the caudal limb of the loop. Hence, this loop is also called bulboventricular loop. Initially, the bulboventricular loop is suspended from the dorsal wall of the pericardial sac by a mesentery called dorsal mesocardium, but the central part of the mesentery soon degenerates, forming a communication between the right and left sides of the pericardial cavity, the transverse pericardial sinus. As the transverse pericardial sinus forms, the bulboventricular loop lies free in the pericardial cavity, but the primitive atrium and sinus venosus lies outside the pericardial cavity, embedded in the septum transversum. As the primitive atrium and sinus venosus get freed from the septum transversum, they enter the pericardial cavity and occupy position posterior-superior to the ventricle. This heart tube now becomes S-shaped. The bulboventricular sulcus disappears, and the bulbous Cordis and primitive ventricles together form a common chamber, the atrial chamber that lies behind the above. Truncus arteriosus expands. As it does, so parts of it come to project forwards on either side of truncus arteriosus as auricles. Clinical aspect: Dextrocardia. In this condition, all the chambers of the heart and associated blood vessels are reversed as a mirror image. That is, all the structures that normally lie on the right side are on the left side. It occurs if the heart tube bends to the left instead of the right. The heart is displaced to the right, and there is transposition. The dextrocardia may be associated with situs inversus, transposition of abdominal viscera. The dextrocardia is the most common positional anomaly of the heart, Ectopia cordis. It is a rare condition in which the heart lies exposed on the surface of the thorax. It occurs due to non-union of the two sternal plates of developing sternum. Death occurs in most of the cases during the first few days of birth. That's how the heart tube forms and develops into the chambers of the heart. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more quick embryology lessons.